My name is Ann Eads. We are talking with Daniel Fergus. He is campus librarian at the Peoria campus of Illinois Central College. And we thank you for being here today, Daniel. These are some questions for the subject of literacy in the disciplines. And we would like to ask you these questions in order to further our studies of what is required in the form of disciplinary literacy for specific careers or jobs. And I'd like to ask you these questions, Daniel. First off, what do you do?
Okay, I'm the campus librarian here, and what that in effect is manage the daily operations of the Peoria campus library. We have some donors for our building, so we're actually formally known as the Banwart Library here, but it is the Peoria campus library. So we've got a staff here of 4 librarians, including myself. There's another full-time librarian, and then there are 2 part-time librarians, as well as a professional staff member who oversees the daily circulation activities at the front desk.
Thank you. Thank you. What is involved in your daily work?
So, probably the primary things is just making sure everything is functioning properly. We have a lot of technical considerations from the computer services side, printing, so students are able to print their class notes or outlines, their papers. But also we need to make sure the resources are accessible for students. Make sure that we have management of the course reserves, which is where we keep most of the textbooks that we have available for students to use. So we try to kind of, if something is missing or out of place, kind of solving those. It's kind of like we describe it as whack-a-mole, the arcade game, where it's kind of these various situations pop up and addressing them one after the other. So it's also requires quite a bit of what we might say is triage, kind of figuring out what some of the more critical ones are and kind of prioritizing on the fly. That's probably the best description of the daily activities. Beyond functionality, typically I have to do a lot of reports. So like right now I'm working on accreditation reports for 2 or 3 academic departments. So I'm compiling that information, which then gets sent forth to the academic departments for their overall academic program report that they have to submit before they have their site visits from their accrediting bodies.
I see. And those accreditation requests are from whom? Are they from the specific
Well, they
department?
typically come from the academic department. Mm-hmm. So like when academic departments go through their accreditation, they have kind of a template or an outline of things that they have to be able to demonstrate to maintain their accreditation. Typically, there are anywhere from 1 to 3 components pertaining to access to learning resources or library type resources. Mm-hmm. And those typically get forwarded to us from the academic departments, and then we go kind of compile that into a report for them and then send that back to them. Though they typically include statistics, but also qualitative data. So one of the things that typically is included is a physical description of the space that we have. Mm-hmm. But also we might, for example, one program I just submitted a report for, they wanted to see just a representative sample of titles for up to 15 different subject areas that might be linked to that particular subject. So it was for the medical assisting program, and they said, give us 15 subjects that you would consider to be related to medical assisting. And so then we had to go through and compile. We tried to get 3 for each of the subject areas where we could say, provide the title and the publication information for those sources. So
it's research on your end.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's, but each accreditation report is a little bit different too. So you've got each each one has different requirements, and so you have to go through and figure out kind of what they're looking for. They're mostly narrative, but there's a lot of appendixes, where you tables and stuff that you submit along with them.
And what do you see the benefit to you and the library when in that endeavor?
Well, the big thing for that is I would say it demonstrates our value, and in a way, it's one of the few areas where librarians really get to partner with, the academic
Yes.
units. Now, ICC is a little bit unique in that we have very great relationships between the faculty and the librarians. You don't see that at a lot of institutions. Or if you do, it's very specialized. So I think ICC, there are plenty of those opportunities to partner with academic units, but accreditation reports in the bigger picture is one of the few opportunities where librarians have that opportunity to do so.
And it's a huge service to the specific departments for which you do that research and reporting.
Right, and in fact, especially the faculty and administrators, they end up being really busy too, and so they're not able to keep up with a lot of those day-to-day type things. And so it's easy to lose track of some of that information. And the thing that they really enjoy about those reports is they're like, oh yeah, that's great. I see you've got these things. And so it's eye-opening for them, and it's a refresher for them as well. So
Yes.
I know a lot of them look forward to receiving their accreditation reports too, just to get that quick synopsis of what is available for their programs.
Incredibly valuable service,
Mhm.
yes. In what way do words matter in your job as this is a literacy project?
Sure, yes. So verbal and written communication are both absolutely indispensable. Just from the day-to-day, there's a lot of verbal communication that happens on the fly, what we might say, where, these problems arise and they require some sort of intervention and communication between patrons and staff. Things are missing, or something's out of place, or something's not working. That dialogue needs to be clear and understood. And I think from a service standpoint, verbal communication, there's always things that get missed.
Yes.
We try our best to communicate with the patrons, but sometimes we don't always ask the right questions.
Or they don't. Or they
right, or we don't ask questions at all, like you say, and so that's where that verbal communication and dialogue is important. But I'd also say written communication is kind of a dying art. And from the non-service standpoint, I would say probably close to 90 to 95% of what's going on behind the scenes, just on the library side of things, is email. Our communication with faculty, our communication with East Peoria campus, our communication with each other even sometimes, because the two full-time librarians tend to work during the day, and then the part-time librarians tend to work at night. There's some overlap, but we get busy, we have our meetings, and we don't necessarily see them all the time. And so we try to have regular department meetings, but a lot of things just get lost in the day-to-day thing. So you have to communicate using the written means, and that can be either leaving a note for somebody at their desk, or email, or we use a chat service too internally, and it's the same chat service so students can send their reference questions in, because all the staff, when we're here, we're logged into that chat queue, so a question can come in and theoretically be answered by any one of us, but we also can communicate amongst ourselves in the same platform.
Okay.
So we have a variety of ways which we do that, but it's which helps out a lot because we don't, like I said, we don't always get to see each other, or it's hard to get people on the phone because like I'm rarely in my office. So probably 80% of my phone calls end up going to voicemail. That's just kind of the nature of today's society. As much as anything, everybody's on the go. So
Yes. That was an excellent synopsis of the types of ways in which you use words in literacy and communication. I think that you answered this question, but you read and write as a part of your job, and the processes are in the research that you do for the accreditation of the departments. You read the emails, the chatting. I'm assuming you read reports as well.
oh sure,
that
yeah,
are
we have meetings and agendas, and we have to do a lot of preparation for the meeting sometimes, because we may be tasked with making a decision. So we have to go in there with our kind of mind made up,
Sure.
you know.
And evidence for those
Right,
decisions.
to be able to make some of those decisions. What processes do I use? This might sound completely unprofessional, but I don't. I kind of wing it a lot of times. I do like to look for what I might say tables or diagrams, where I can easily digest a lot of information. But a lot of times it kind of depends on what it is that I'm dealing with.
Sure.
I don't really have a set process. Part of that's because I don't necessarily always have the opportunity to
write
employ a process,
Yes, yes.
I'm digesting information sometimes just moments before the meeting, and that's just because of the time crunch situation more so than anything. Ideally, though, what I do take a lot of things home with me and just kind of review, but I employ a lot of the same strategies when I'm skimming through to pull information from, kind of how you would skim a scholarly article, where you kind of have an idea of the organization of the paper and figure out where the elements you need are in the paper, and then pull that information out that way. But when you're dealing with data, I pretty much go straight to tables and charts and try to digest what I can that way, just for the facility of it as much as anything.
Excellent answer. Thank you. Thank you. If you were to interview a candidate for a job in the library, what demands for reading and writing and perhaps discussion or speaking and listening would you expect for him to know that are specific to that type of work?
So primarily when we look at student assistant interviews, it's primarily verbal. There's very little written component there. That said, some students do submit resumes and cover letters, and that does lend some weight to their application, both good and bad, depending on
The resume.
on the quality of the paper. But I will say the easiest mistake to make, just from the professional side of things and one serving on search committees, is brevity is key. So it's great if you have eloquent writing skills, but it's important to be able to demonstrate that in as efficient a manner as possible. And that can be a lot of give and take sometimes too, because your cover letter is your one opportunity to be able to demonstrate what isn't apparent in the resume, in the application, but at the same time, you still have to explain how you meet the requirements as outlined in those things. So you've got a lot to cover, and in that space, and you don't have a lot of real estate to be able to do that.
Yes.
That's probably the biggest thing, is to be able to communicate efficiently in that written component in an interview situation. Going back to the verbal aspect of things, one of the things that I think is critical is to be able to have a dialogue
Yes.
during that. The best interviews I find are the ones where you have that exchange and have more of a conversation than just a question and answer drilling session. Those are kinds of the things that I look for going into a job search or an interview situation.
Thank you, Daniel. What cognitive tasks are involved, such as synthesis or demands of reading and writing for you in your job? And I think you explained that somewhat in your research, the ability to decipher and extract information from graphs and data and scholarly article reading of the accreditation procedures and requirements for those reports. Do you have any other additional cognitive tasks that you could mention or think of?
Well, I would just say one of the things, maybe beyond what I'd explained earlier too, is we have to stay current on the current literature ourselves as professionals.
Absolutely.
So we have to know what the trends and scholarship and research that's going on in our professional fields. It's because things move at the speed of light really anymore.
Yes.
They really do. Things that are an idea 6 months ago can be spreading like wildfire in the span of 18 months and
Yes.
be pretty universally adapted.
Yes.
And so that can be missed if you don't stay up with some of those trends and developments.
Yes. Do you read periodicals or any type of check on websites?
We do. We have several journals that we get internally, like Library Journal, Computers and Libraries, Book List. And they each kind of do different things. So Book List is primarily book reviews. And that's kind of what we go to when we do our ordering of materials, or what we call collection development. We go to the reviews and see how they're recommended. And we have online tools that we use too. So there's another one called Choice, which is an online portal, and it's linked to the book ordering website. So we can see the reviews and right from there dump it into our basket if we wanted to do that, and that's pretty slick too. But Book List is one where we have to we go through and we have to rotate the journals among the staff. So I usually go through for my subject areas and make copies of the pages and try to move them along as fast as I can, and then I keep a folder of collection development stuff where when I get ready to do the ordering, then I go back to that. And I have that information in a file. But Library Journal is more of like the professional scholarship, and in fact, actually, with our new library space here, we're trying to get included in the November issue, which is where they showcase the new libraries for the year. So they did some professional photography here several weeks ago.
Wonderful.
And so the submission deadline is sometime this month. We don't know that we're going to be in it, but we're going to wait and see. So we should know hopefully fairly soon.
I would like to read that
Yeah.
copy if that happens. Thank you. And what would you say to teachers about the language demands for your profession and your particular job? And I think maybe we could bring in some of the English language learners in this question, this final question, because I know we've had experience with my students coming to work for you, and there are some concerns and skills that I, as a teacher of English language learners, could provide in my classroom that would enable them to be better library assistants for you.
Sure. So, one of the things that as professionals we have to be cautious of, and I catch myself doing this all the time, is I use a lot of big words sometimes, and I have to catch myself a lot of times around particularly just not even just English learners, but native speakers too. Common language is a good thing for professionals to remember. But in terms of learners and even native speakers, the demands of the workplace. So, you've got those verbal skills that you're going to be employing the entire time you're on the job.
Yes.
Each transaction presents the opportunity for that dialogue and conversation.
Yes.
And you don't necessarily have to have great verbose speaking skills or vocabulary. You just need to be able to get to the point. That's asking the right questions. If you're not, and that translates also to that, in that you're not only asking the questions to understand, but if there's words you don't understand, to ask what those words are. The other thing too, of course, as you're probably aware, is the idioms and phrases and expressions that we use. Just the other day, we had an international student, and I handed him something just to look at, and I said, "Here, check this out." And it was not a library item, and so the poor guy was so confused because he wanted to. He's like, "I don't know how to check this out." So
Instruction in idioms.
yes, right. And so I think that's one thing that's unavoidable in the English language, is people just use those so flippantly almost. Yes. That's learning what some of those sayings and expressions are. That doesn't mean we should still refrain from using them, but a lot of times we use them and don't even think about it or realize it. True. So
being conscious.
That's just right. Yeah. I think that those are some of the instructional concerns that you might have. And again, in writing, it's not so much what you say or how you say it, but how efficiently you can communicate that. I can't stress that enough. And I say that as somebody that struggles with brevity myself in my writing. So I think that's efficiency is really the key.
Wonderful. As a teacher, I am going to use this information that you've provided in many ways, because I think you have given us the context of the librarian as a profession, but also the context of effective communication, both in speaking and reading and writing, that could be instrumental in assisting my lesson planning.
Sure.
So I really thank you, Mr. Furgess, for your time, for sharing and shedding light on your profession, which I learned a lot, and I think sharing the recording will also share a lot of information with my colleagues. So thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Sure.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.